Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Hello, parents. I'm Jen, the founder of Thriving Parents Collective, and I want to take a moment to speak to you directly from the heart. As a parent myself, I understand the joys and struggles that come with raising kids in today's fast-paced world. When I started this journey, I felt overwhelmed and very unsure. I realized that we all need a little support and guidance along the way. That's why I created Thriving Parents Collective, because I believe that every parent deserves to feel empowered and confident in their parenting journey. Our personalized coaching and courses are designed to meet you exactly where you're at. We can help you gain clarity, build stronger connections, and navigate the challenges of raising your unique child. Together, we can create a nurturing environment where both you and your child can thrive. If you're ready to take the first step towards a more fulfilling parenting experience, I invite you to visit us at thrivingparentscollective.com and schedule your free discovery call. Let's embark on this journey together. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. In today's episode, we're diving deep into a topic that's crucial for so many families navigating the education system, and that is the Individualized Education Program, or IEP. An IEP is more than just a document. It is a powerful tool that can support your child to find success and belonging at school. We work with so many families who often feel overwhelmed navigating the IEP process, and we're hoping that this discussion today can create some clarity and even give you a few ideas as you embark on the path of joining with the school to create a personalized plan for your child. Today, we will cover what exactly an IEP is, how to get the process started, and ways you can not only advocate for your child, but also form a strong team with the school to help your child flourish. Today, we're joined by Sarah Dimick, who you have seen on the show before. I have the pleasure of working with Sarah in her role as a parent coach and yoga therapy specialist at Children's Therapy Network and Thriving Parents Collective. Sarah joins this conversation today with just a ton of real-life knowledge. Prior to becoming a parent coach, she was a school psychologist for 20 years working in the schools, providing psychoeducation and mental health services for kids ranging from age 3 to 13, and has guided IEP teams throughout the entire time. Sarah is also a certified yoga teacher and is passionate about using movement for regulating the mind and body. I am excited to talk to Sarah today as someone who has both been in the schools and who also supports parents to meet their child right where they're planted. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Can you just explain sort of what an IEP is and what an IEP would be used for our kids?
Sure. So IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan or Program. And so an IEP is really used to deliver specialized instruction for a child who has been identified as meeting criteria in one of the disability areas that school might recognize. So it really is the plan that the adults in school should be following. It'll include goals, it'll include supplementary services that a child may need, it'll include perhaps a behavior plan if that's necessary. So it's supposed to be an all-encompassing sort of plan to help this child really access and benefit from their education.
And so, in your experience, what are some of the signs or the cues that parents may have that say, "Oh, gosh, I wonder if my child would benefit from seeking some sort of specialized IEP plan"?
So that might happen if a child were coming into the school system with a prior diagnosis. So let's say autism had been diagnosed early, or there were some medical or health concerns, and you knew that some supports might be needed. So parents are very aware of that through other services and agencies that have been in contact with the family. If it's later in schooling or you haven't heard from teachers, you might just be noticing your child is really resistant to working on reading at home, or you might be noticing a lot of anxiety about going to school in the morning. You might notice dysregulation at the end of the day. There can be lots of reasons for dysregulation, but one
Mm-hmm.
of them may be that, wow, learning is hard, or there's something about this school environment that's really challenging for me. So those would be times that a parent may want to start the conversation with school. Just what are you noticing? Are there ways that you can support my kiddo? It doesn't always have to be an IEP. So there's lots of levels of support.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask that because, in my experience being on the clinic side, I have some children who are struggling in school and have an IEP, and
Mhm.
some who might be struggling in school and don't have an IEP. So let's just talk through that process of, we're noticing some differences. Either maybe the teacher brings it to the parent, but often it's the parent, right, who's like, gosh, there's something happening here. What are those steps that the parents, you mentioned talking to the teacher, right? Creating connection with the teacher, creating a relationship with the teacher. What are some of the more formalized steps or the next steps from there to determine if an IEP is appropriate for a child?
Yeah, so I would obviously, as you said, start with the teacher. And then I think there's usually a point person in the school who may be able to help you open the process. So usually the school psychologist, sometimes it might be a program support teacher. There could be different titles, but you could certainly call your school and find out, like, who do I talk to about special education or an IEP process? And then it can be just a conversation in terms of, like, are there any other supports available to my child? Because schools will often want to try something
Mm-hmm.
before moving to the special education process. So they might say, we're struggling in reading. Are there any reading intervention groups? Is there any data to indicate that my child might benefit from a reading intervention group? Perhaps it's behavior that you're concerned about. And so you
Mm-hmm.
might say, are there check-ins that we can do? Is there some sort of formalized behavior program or school counseling program that my child might benefit from, and get some data on those interventions, because if they're helpful, wonderful, that's exactly where we want to be. And if you're feeling like we're still struggling, we're not getting to where we want to be, it might be time to open up the IEP process. And again, the usually the school psychologist can help you do that.
I love how you talk about sort of the levels. Like if a child is struggling, we don't jump just to opening an ITP process. There's
Yeah.
all of these layers and these steps. And at least over the course of my career, I've noticed that different school districts do it a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all, though, guided by the federal requirements, right? There's these federal requirements that come into play. There's deadlines and timelines and things like that. But before that, yes, there are usually steps. And I also love how you said data. Tell me a little bit more about the data piece because I have heard this recently and I think it's important for parents to know.
Yeah, I mean, we could see our own kids struggling, but we may not understand that in the context of their whole classroom or their grade. So, although
Mhm.
your child may be complaining about reading or math, there might be kids who are struggling just as much, if not more. And so, data can be really important just to help you get a picture of, like, where is my kid? Where do they fit? Is this truly a learning disability, or is this a learning difference? So that can be sort of an important way to look at data and collect data. Is it, how big is it? How important is it? I think data gets a little messier when you're talking about behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a tricky thing to measure accurately. And I think that just deserves a nice conversation with school staff, whoever that might be, whether it's the teacher or support staff, about, like, what are the behavior supports and how are we going to keep track of if they're working or not.
Yes. Yes. I see that all the time, trying to figure out what part is working, right?
Yeah.
What part of
Yeah.
this plan is working and what part maybe do we need to update a little bit.
Yep.
And so an IEP, let's say we've tried all of those initial strategies and, it's just not seeing the change, or the child is still really struggling, and the school decides, or the parent formally requests, to open an IEP evaluation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the child is going to end up with an IEP, right?
Correct.
And so I think that
Correct.
that's also a misnomer that a lot of parents have, right? We're going to open an IEP process. We're going to have this plan.
Mhm.
And that's just not how it works. So let's talk about that as well.
We've had parents come to school and say, here's the prescription from my doctor. They said, get an IEP. And a parent just feels like we just pull one off the shelf and hand it off. And that is not the intent of the process. It is very individualized. So there are two questions you need to answer when you're in the special education or IEP process. The first one is, does this child meet the criteria for a certain disability area? And the second question is, does this child require specialized instruction in order to benefit? And I think that's where a lot of people get sort of stuck or hung up. Maybe they meet criteria, but it does not mean that they need an IEP. Or maybe they meet criteria and they very clearly could benefit from some individualized instruction.
And I see that so much with our unique kids, right? The kids who we're really talking about in this podcast, right? Is like meeting our kids where we're at is, so many of our kids are, I'll give an example of neurodivergent, right? So they have diagnoses of autism or anxiety or ADHD. And that doesn't necessarily in the school's mind mean that they qualify for specialized services.
True. True. And that is tricky.
It's really tricky.
It is tricky. And I often feel like parents and schools actually do both want what's best for the child, but they sometimes have different ideas about what that will actually look.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're also going to need to talk about when a child doesn't qualify, right? And like what else we can do. Let's say the child is found eligible, right, for an IEP. Okay, well, how can parents prepare? What's next? What comes? What happens in this?
Yeah. So it depends a little bit on the school district and how they like to run meetings. Some schools are prepared to go right from that eligibility determination into creating a plan. Okay. And some schools like to have 2 meetings. So as a parent, I would just want to know, like, how are we going to do this? What should I expect in this meeting? Are we just getting through eligibility? Or if we're moving into a plan, I want to be prepared with some of my own goals or ideas. So I think getting straight on that first would be really important. And then I think parents should be welcomed into this process. Yes. And hopefully they are feeling that from somebody on the school team, that your input really is valued and we want to hear from you. And whether that is through assessment forms or whether that's through a conversation where you're telling me, what goals do you have for your kiddo and what do you picture for them later in life? Those kinds of conversations can be really helpful. And then I think the actual meeting of, if there is an IEP, creating those goals, parents can expect a lot of data.
Lots of data is thrown around.
A lot of data, and just sort of sorting through the data and saying, where are we now? What's our baseline? Where do we want to be? What's our goal? And then trying to write some goals around whether it's reading or whether it's math or whether it's behavior, emotional regulation, whatever it might be. Trying to get to the place of writing some really specific, measurable goals.
And I always find, I've sat in on a number of IEPs over the course of my time for clients that I'm working with. And I always find that when we can see the child as one child, both they live in a home and they live in a community and they go to school, it seems to serve them better than this idea that everything is going to be focused on, we're going to shift and change everything in the school day, right?
Yeah.
There's this back and this forth that happens of like the parent saying, gosh, we're really working on XYZ at home. School saying, gosh, we're really circling around and working on this, so that there's these, these 2 lenses and this common ground, if that makes sense. Have you seen that as well when we find success?
Yes, I think if we are to find success, it is both of those, seeing the child in all context, all environments. Yeah. I think schools are somewhat limited in that they need to deal with the school environment, what's happening during the school day, which can be challenging and really frustrating for parents. Parents saying, my kid is falling apart after school, like we need some help. And the school going, well, they're okay here. Right. And so that is a hard place to work from.
Gosh, we see this so often. So often, where the child just really, I don't know, 3 intakes a week. You do a number more for our organization of new families coming in. And this is the one thing I hear over and over and over again. School, how's school going? Great. The teacher says they're a model student. How's home going? They walk through the door and it's a disaster zone all night long.
Yep.
And so I feel like, there's this place to have this like ongoing conversation about this is one whole child, right? And you're right. The schools, by definition of what a school is somewhat limited in what they're able to support with development. Their focus is learning.
Absolutely. And schools are overwhelmed. And so as much as they might want to be helpful, or they feel for the parent, or they love this kid and want what's best for the kid, again, they are limited in what they can provide.
Mm-hmm. And so going into that meeting, knowing all of these things, what are some other supports we can give parents? What are some things we can help them be prepared, show up with in order to create some success?
I think if there's been any outside evaluation that can be really helpful, school will probably still do their own evaluation, but it is nice to have the full picture, as you were talking about, the whole child. So any outside evaluations, if there's been any outside providers, let's say they have OT or speech and language outside of school, can we get some input from those people? Other supports, the district may have a parent advocate. And so if you are concerned that your voice won't be heard in this meeting, see if there's a parent advocate who can attend with you. There are different disability organizations that will also provide advocates, or at least resources and information for parents to bring to a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know in our area, it's Wisconsin Facets is one that provides just some really nice understanding of like what the rules are, right? Yeah. What the legalities are. So at least parents know like, here's what's supposed to happen, and not to necessarily, expect something that's not even supposed to happen, or vice versa, know like what's supposed to be happening in a meeting. There's a ton of power in that. When I really think about sometimes our little bit older kids, who start to have some feelings, some opinions about what happens in school and, how all that goes, is what have you found as success in creating success with incorporating the child's voice?
So if a child has an IEP starting at age 14, schools are supposed to start doing that, having those conversations about what do you think this will look like after high school? Let's start to do some transition planning, and they will pull in the child's voice that way, which I think is amazing. If, as the parent, I think it's also what a nice conversation to have with your child to say, hey, what would make school better? Like, is there anything you can think of that would just help you feel better in school, and see what your kid says. And sometimes kids have crazy ideas, but look for what's underneath that crazy idea and see if you can bring a piece of it to the meeting. Like, hey, this really helps my kid feel safe. And that's when they learn best. So can we somehow incorporate this into our plan? If your child doesn't have an IEP, I think you can still have those same kind of conversations, like what would make school feel better for you, and then have the conversation with their teacher, who I think really does want to help, right? And so we'll say, yeah, we need a break corner. Fine, we can make that happen. Or we need some more movement. Sure, yes, like we can make that happen.
Mm-hmm. I work with one little guy who learning isn't the challenge. The sensory environment of school in the social is very challenging. It's so much. It's so much. And, he over the years has become such a good advocate for himself. And some of his ideas just are never going to work. When I'm feeling upset, I need my phone and I need everybody to leave the room until I'm ready. It's not always going to happen.
Right.
But the ability to verbalize and self-advocate and know that the school team has heard what might make it feel better, and that the school team is able to say, hey, gosh, we can't have everybody leave the room, but what if you could go pick your place in the school so long as we know where you are to help regulate? Or what if, there's always snacks in somebody's office that you can come just like connect in, and that self-advocacy, that hearing his voice. Or today's school's really hard, so you're just going to stay home, right? Knowing that this kid really wants to learn, he really wants to be there. He really wants to learn. It's just really challenging. The context of the school environment itself can be just really challenging for a
Very
lot of
challenging.
kids. For a lot
Very
of kids.
challenging.
Yeah. And so as we talk about IEPs and what that looks like, let's talk about the alternatives a little bit, right? We talked about the in-betweens. I know that there's something that parents, I know in our area, they're starting to seem to use a lot. It's called a 504 plan. Let's talk about that a little bit and then some of the other alternatives. Yeah, what's a 504 plan?
Good question. So a 504 plan is an accommodation plan, and it falls under civil liberties, and that we all have the right to be able to accommodate or access our education or other important life experiences. So an adult could actually have a 504 plan at their workspace. If you needed it for a health reason or asthma, and maybe you need some accommodations. So I think that is really important for people to know. It's an accommodation plan. In schools, it is a lot like the IEP process, with the exception that there is not specialized instruction tied to the 504 plan. So again, you'd go through the process of determining eligibility. It looks a little bit different from 504 to an IEP. An IEP generally having sort of a higher standard or level of needing to meet criteria. A 504, a little easier to qualify. You still generally have to have either a diagnosis or a condition that affects a major life event, is sort of how they term it. And then from there, it's really talking about what are the accommodations that are going to allow you to access the regular education curriculum just like any other child. So it may be, I just need extra time to read the book, or maybe I need to hear the book because reading is challenging. So accommodations that we might make would be longer time on tests or listening to the book instead of just reading the book. Perhaps there's something around organization. Maybe a kid really struggles with organizing or those executive functioning skills. So perhaps there's a built-in checkout at the end of the day where we make sure you have your materials that you're going to need for homework. Or there's a graphic organizer so we can help you with writing. There can also be behavioral accommodations. So like I need a drink break. I need to be able to get up and walk down the hall and get a drink of water. And then I have sort of reset and I'm ready to come back in the classroom.
Awesome. I find that those accommodations, those strategies, gosh, they can be so powerful for our kids.
Yeah. Well, they're just sort of, I think, acknowledging basic human needs.
I think so. And I think that when there's just a strong teaming between parent and school to help the child learn to advocate for their needs, you see so much success as opposed to this like refusal and avoidance that happens when the needs aren't being met, for a lot of our kids.
Yeah. I mean, as an adult, I would want my now kid to be able to say, this is what I need to do my job best, right?
Yeah.
That's a great skill to have in the workplace. So let's start that in school. This is what I need. I think it's challenging for kids because there's so much pressure to look like everybody else and be achieving at the same level as everybody else. And I think we really need to change that conversation to everybody's brain is different and where you are is okay. And we're going to help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah. What would you say to parents who are really struggling to support their kiddos to find success in the schools, either with a really solid IEP in place, maybe with a challenging system they're working within where the IEP isn't quite meeting the needs? What are your 2 cents in this parent coaching work? What would you, having been a school psychologist and seeing the other side for so long, what would you say to a parent?
That is tricky. It's tricky, again, because schools are somewhat limited.
Yeah.
And schools are also operating under their own system and their own rules and regulations, which say, like, I need to get a kid reading at this level. Or, their teachers are under a lot of pressure themselves.
Yeah.
So I think there's some acknowledgement of that. Let's validate that this is hard for everybody. And then I think this place of, can parents get really clear on what's important for their child and what does success look like? And that's where it can be tricky because the school might have a different idea. But as a parent, what's most important to you? What do you value? Do you value that your child is feeling happy and safe and secure and develops a love of learning? Or do you value high achievement and I want my child to be in chemistry and advanced algebra and all the classes? So let's at least start there. And then I think you can narrow it down to what's feeling, most important in this moment.
I think that's just lovely. And I think that, for some families, that means that they're going to continue to just create joy and go to school and have friends. And for some parents, that might mean they look at an alternative solution. If you're so fortunate to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And all are okay. Right?
Yeah.
All are okay.
Yeah.
All are acceptable and okay. And, as we really look to meet our kids where they're at, keeping that really open mind about all of the avenues to creating learning success for our kids through an IEP process or not through an IEP process.
Valid. True.
Might be helpful and useful and create sort of the end goal for your kiddo that you're really looking for.
Yeah. I think keeping an open mind. I know a lot of parents whose children are struggling in school and they're really resistant to any online learning. And in my personal experience with a kiddo who did not like high school, took an English class online and did fabulously. And all of my worries and concerns about he's not going to engage, he's not going to learn anything, were not true. And so have an open mind. Be okay with something that might look a little bit different because maybe it's exactly what your kid needs.
Absolutely. Awesome. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much, Sarah.
All right. Thank you.
Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.